Thank you kindly, Dr. Salami. A pleasure to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are watching this event. And yeah, as it was mentioned, I'm Ieva Žilionienė, Chief Consulting Officer at NRD Companies, and together with my colleague, Michailas Traubas, we will have a joint presentation to introduce and share with you the main practical findings about how to successfully develop digital services, which are crucial part of digital transformation of any government. So let's proceed. When we are speaking about digital transformation, it's a very popular and frequent word in today's public policies in any country. When we look closer, what does this mean? In general, it's about service transformation. It's about how governments smartly integrate technologies, and not just technologies, but much more, to make the services for their citizens, for their businesses, much better. And that is the crucial thing. As Mindaugas Glodas mentioned in previous presentation, it's not just about technology, although sometimes we tend to forget it, but it's about actually reimagining the processes and redesigning the services, redesigning them from the perspective of citizens and businesses. Because the final goal is not to have some fancy technology, a platform or a tool, but to have better services for users, services that are simple, that are seamless, and that are trusted. And more and more governments and institutions all around the world, and we can witness that from our very practical and hands-on experience working with them, realize that digital services is not something nice to have. Digital services are like digital face of the governments, and their maturity, their quality influence how people see the governments, how happy they are with these interactions, because each this interaction shapes trust. It can build them if its interaction is good, or erode it. Interesting thing is that in some parts of the world, governments are investing in digitalizing these services already for quite many years, more than 20 years somewhere, in some parts. Are the people happy there? Not necessarily. A study done in 2022 in Europe, North America, and Australia showed that still, despite huge investments, more than 50% of respondents think that using government services is quite a frustrating experience. So it's something that is not bringing much happiness and still seen as a burden. And only 1/3 of respondents think that these services, these processes are really intuitive, easy to understand and go through. Another survey shows that citizens' satisfaction with government services is 21 percentage points behind the private sector. And that's understandable because we are quite used today to get very good services from private companies, which even predict what we want, be it a song or a purchase. And I think everyone would be happy to have similar experience when dealing with our public institutions. The issue, what we witness from our work is that people in general, they are not interested in the process. They don't want the process when we are thinking about something that we need from the government. They are not interested in if that process is like on paper or if it is like electronic form. They want a service which feels like a result. So it is simple, transparent, and fast. When we need to register a newborn baby, to get a business license, to get an education certificate, we want to get that result and to get it done fast. So from working for more than 25 years in this domain, from having lots of practical experience of developing and launching public digital services, from being very well acquainted with best methodologies and insights and frameworks of international institutions who work in this domain, I boiled down many pages of information to 7 characteristics of good digital service. First of all, it's user-centered. It means that person is at the center, the future user, not what is now in the law, not what we as institution think that the service should look like. But here is the important shift to put ourselves into the shoes of the user and to understand why they come to the institution and what experience they would love. Second is clean and lean processes on which we build digital services. So we cannot take a process as it is now on paper and try to digitalize it. That would be a very bad digital service. So first of all, it's rethinking the processes. Then getting data which is already in the state, which is in different institutions automatically, and not asking for the person who comes to get a service to bring that document or data again. Fourth, this service should be open to innovation, open to further improvements. It's not that we build a digital service and then can forget it for a year or 5 years or 10 years. It should be improved as technology moves further, as users express their further needs. And that's why choosing technology and vendor here is very important. Then the fifth is about digital public infrastructure. If you follow the discussions and the frameworks inside digital government domain, you of course have heard about that. These like general building blocks, which are built once in a country, such as digital ID, digital payments gateway, or interoperability platform. And then these digital public infrastructures are being used by different institutions to build their own digital public services without reinvesting and reinventing what is already developed. Organized around live events, that also becomes more and more important when we think about digital services and their attractiveness to users. Let's imagine young parents have a newborn baby. They have so much things to care about. So of course, they can be forced to go through different institutions to register a baby, to register a place of residence, to register for a doctor, to get some social benefits. But more and more countries are rethinking the process, meaning that by one click, you can get all these services as one package, and you don't care then what institution is delivering which part of the service. It's like instant getting all the package. And of course, accessible across all the channels and devices, because in different countries, people have different habits, how they access digital government services. In some countries, it's more desktop users, in some countries, kiosks, in some countries, mobile devices. So thinking about that also, how our services will be accessed is very important. And how easy it is to build such a service? Not very easy, that's true. And as it was discussed a bit in Mindaugas Glauda's presentation, the risk here is not the technology, usually, but then there is a misalignment between ambition and vision and governance. So what we always advise the government before starting the reform is to understand clearly the scope of change, but it is not something the IT department should do, but it is not something that is just buying a fancy technological solution. It is about change of institution, of the processes, of the skills that we have. So once we understand the scope, then we should build realistic roadmap for the reform, understanding where we start, how much time it would take, what efforts, what timelines, and then to plan it properly. And of course, willingness and readiness to deliver, because it is a journey and it should be planned and implemented, seeing the end result and trying really hard to get it. So motivation is crucial here. And how to develop this roadmap is also, we have a framework based on very practical, very hands-on experiences, which have like 7 steps. And now we will quickly go through each of these steps, illustrating them with practical examples from the projects in which we are working now or have been working in the past, or the examples which we know pretty well. So first, some countries want to go big scale and to digitalize as many services as possible. But our advice always is start from assessing the actual demand for that service and actual digital maturity, which the service has now. So where to start? We should start digitalizing there. We will have the biggest impact. And that impact we can assess from 2 angles. The end user's angle. So what do people need most from this institution? What is the number of annual users of that service, of transactions, of needed interactions? So that helps us to identify the most crucial services and also to look at them from institutions' perspective. So how many resources we could save, how more efficient we could be, and how many reputational issues also we could solve if we digitalize the service. And second thing is to measure the actual maturity of the service. Sometimes when we discuss with institutions, they say, but look, we already put that form online, so we did our job. This is digital service. But there are different levels of services digital maturity. And by this QR code, you could scan it and open like a questionnaire, which is a very easy methodological tool developed by our team to assess the actual digital maturity of the service and also to see how to do that much better. So from here, Michailas, please proceed with practical example.
Thank you, Ieva. So let's have a look at the digital government transformation project in St. Martin, where we are managing the whole complex program. And one of the tasks of the project is to establish the digital service delivery roadmap. So to do that, there have been a couple of things done. First, it was full inventory of services and processes existing in the government, irrespective whether they are digital or non-digitalized yet. And the second important area was to create the prioritization scheme that will allow to identify and to agree upon what service should go first and what can wait a bit. With that, we can have clear identification of quick wins to start from, and then to see the long-term gains to proceed strategically. So how that prioritization framework was established, if we could move on. So we had the assessment of user demand and impact of the services, meaning what is the actual demand for that service, how frequently it's used, how essential it is, and what is the digital inclusion the service will deliver, or what is the overall inclusion. Because some very important services might target just 10% or 5% of population. The second perspective is institutional or organizational, and we are looking into potential cost savings, trust, and strategic alignment of the service towards the organizational goals. If we have all of that, Then we do the feasibility and readiness assessment of those services. Yeah, just click once more, please. Because even if the service is very important, the question is, do we have data required to build the service? Is the technology ready to support the service? And how conducive the legal environment is? How users are ready to do that? Based on those three factors, we can have the right priority in the roadmap for the services to be delivered.
Next step, after we already identified where we must start to have the most impact, is re-engineer the processes. So, as I briefly mentioned before, very bad practice is to take the process as it is now, even if it's now embedded in legislation and regulations, and to try to digitalize it as it is. That would be a bad example of the project. The starting point when we think about re-engineering is the user centricity. We must think, so how to make this process as lean and as easy for a user as possible. And that means quite a lot of work for the institution or institutions, because it's really easier to take process as it is and try to somehow adjust it to technology than to rethink from scratch. But that really pays off, because that is one of the most important preconditions for a good digital service. So what are these things? Just very shortly, because of course, under all these things, we have different methodologies and approaches and frameworks, how to do that. But to put it very simply, it means eliminate all unnecessary procedures, phase out paper documents, minimize citizen-institution interactions, apply the only principle, meaning that if this information in digital format is already somewhere in some institution of the country, we should use that information already, use that data, and not ask the same data from people who need the service again. Reduce manual internal processes through automation, and of course, artificial intelligence here opens lots and lots of possibilities. Ensure transparency. Where is my request now? Which is quite a usual question to people who are waiting for the results of the requested services. Deliver services proactively. If you have data, you know that at specific points of life, the person already is entitled to some service, to some benefit, needs some support. So in these cases, services can be given proactively without even asking. And again, it is not about technology. It's rethinking and allowing in our roadmap when we think about the future reform to put place for thinking in time, how processes will change, how institutions should change, how regulations should adapt, and then which digital tools would be the best fit for this specific digital service. Michailas?
Yeah. So just to illustrate how business process engineering can influence the digital service, we looked at how the personal income tax declaration has changed in Lithuania over past 20 years. When it started back in 2004, the e-filing was introduced and it was built to support digitized forms. Generally, the processes have been engineered to process paper form submissions, and in the same manner, electronic forms were submitted and processed in the same way. Still, the solution has taken care of some important elements Ieva has mentioned, like phasing out paper documents, minimizing citizen-institution interactions, because that was online already. But as the time went by, also the technologies changed, the possibilities changed, and only in 5 years, in 2009, State Tax Inspectorate already introduced significant changes in the business processes based on the technologies. So it moved towards the true digital forms, which took care of reducing manual processes, provided intuitive automation like recalculations, validations, and so on. It also got access to the vast amount of data collected by the tax inspectorate, which meant that we could have pre-fills for different information which was required in our personal income tax submissions. And believe me, it was still quite long process to complete that tax declaration. So 10 years passed, and the technologies changed significantly. People went mobile from computers and so on. And the state tax inspector understood that now they have to reshape the process, to re-engineer it nearly from the white paper once again, to reflect the demands of the citizens who are mobile users, heavy mobile users, who don't like long application forms and so on. So as an outcome, the completely redesigned process and solution were born based on guided tax filing wizard, talking in human language, explaining all the matters not in tax terms, but in really human terms. Mobile first design, so now it's really easy to submit the personal income tax declaration from a smartphone within 3 to 5 minutes from starting. And it's integrated with other DPIs, for example, with the payments. So immediately after submitting my personal income tax, I can pay my taxes if something is due. So what we wanted to highlight here is that user expectations and state of technology also have significant impact on the process as it is being designed. And the starting point for the process should be aligned with the user readiness. It would be good not to start new solutions at the point that was normal 15 years ago. New solutions should start now and here.
So, first step is to plan required data changes. Because without data, it's really difficult to imagine a good digital services. It's like a fuel for digital service. So to have possibility even to develop good, user-friendly digital services, first of all, we have to have precise and reliable data in national digital registries, and also have to apply this once only principle, which I briefly mentioned before. So if once only principle means that if a person already submitted or by any other means the government, the institutions have some data about me, my personal data, my residence data, my employment data, etc. So this data, when it is needed for different services to be delivered to me, should be not asked from me again, but should be shared between institutions, of course, following clear legislation, clear regulation rules, who can access this data and how. But for this to work in practice, there are several important things. First of all, we have to have a clear inventory in data. Of course, first of all, we have to have it precise and reliable, as mentioned in the first point. But then, next thing is to know what data is stored where, in which institutions, which registers or information systems, and to have interoperability platforms or other solutions which enable the exchange of data between institutions. Michailas?
Yeah. So just to illustrate how that data can help the governments to build better services, we have chosen implementation of online business register in Belize. Before that, Belize had 2 business registers, one for domestic companies, another one for international, which was immediately a challenge for anyone willing to get data because you don't know where to find that data. So the idea was to consolidate that information into a single register and from there to provide online access for the businesses to the registration flow. So the users can access the critical services whenever needed. And this also helped to have digital system, modern system, which provides digital processes, fully replacing manual paper-based processes. So less paper and so on. What is the outcome? It's the registration of the business in Belize now takes 24 hours, where previously it took 10 to 15 days. And what is even more important, data is accessible from a single point whenever it's needed, and everyone knows where to find that data because there is single register for all types of companies. So at the end of the day, now online business register in Belize is a digital public infrastructure building block, which is very important for the government to build new services in the future.
So only at the fourth step, we come to the technology in general. Then the solution should be taken, planned, what technology we will implement. So when we think about this step of the roadmap, essential to keep in mind several things. When we will be planning the technology, we should not forget use of mentioned before digital public infrastructure. So for digital identification, more and more countries already have developed or are developing the digital ID, e-authentication tools. They have digital payments, gateways. They have solutions for data exchange, for interoperability and delivery. So these should be used, and similar solutions which deliver the same functionality should not be developed by each institutions who are developing digital services. Next thing is to choose tools which are designed to meet specific user needs and specific service needs. We should not build a plane when we need a car. We should not put into our requests and TORs fancy buzzwords just because they are now trendy, but we don't know very well what business process it will improve, what problem it will solve. So understanding that we should select tools which solve our practical needs. Then next is to select solutions that are flexible, user-friendly, and won't get us into vendor lock-in. Because once we build the digital service, hopefully quite quickly, users will start using it, and they will start to provide good feedback, valuable feedback, because they will, even if you test it very well and co-designed with the users, still the actual use will show room, what could be further improved. And also technologies change, new possibilities come. You have to sometimes to connect your services to other processes, etc., etc. And that means that the solution which you choose should be flexible and allow you to improve without having to go again for a big public procurement and spend a lot of money. And also to ensure that these services are easy to access and locate. So no scattered services through many different institutions' websites. One-stop shop like government portals are a good solution here. And of course, bundling these services into live events, be it a baby is born, I want to establish a business, I want to travel for long-term abroad. There's different kinds of live events about which these different services can be combined to further increase user experience and satisfaction. Michailas?
Yeah, just to illustrate those technology decision points, we have chosen two key stories here. The first one is from Lithuania. We have an organization called National Land Service, which is responsible for managing the processes of land ownership supervision. When their task got to digitalize the processes, they turned to GXP, a services delivery platform by NRD, to build those services and to establish new capabilities. So what happened? GXP, first of all, builds on digital public infrastructure building blocks, because all public services related to land ownership require a lot of identification information, digital signatures, payments for the service delivery, managing different documents, and certain registers, starting from population register, moving to business register, to land register, and so forth. Another important moment is that those services are easily accessible via National e-Services portal. So for the users who are willing to do something, they don't need to know the agency's name. They need to know that they need something about land, go to National e-Services portal, and they will be redirected to the right service then. And what additional capability was provided by GXP? It's ability to deliver the same digitalized service online and via their agents in the regions. Because not everyone, not every user is digital savvy enough to use those services, and many people in the countryside still tend to use like fill in paper forms or just bring in their documents. So for national land service, the same solution caters for both types of the users. What we see as the ultimate outcome of the solution on the next slide, there are several processes for all of them. Average duration shortened from 20 days to 1.5 days. We see that 50% of requests are submitted online now, and we see that there are over 130,000 requests to registers monthly. So Lithuania is a very modest-sized country. We have population less than 3 million, so 130,000 requests to registers means very intensive use of the solution and the integrations, which the principle of the solution allows. And moving to the next case, it's also about the context. As Ieva mentioned to me, well, you don't digitalize in isolation. So meeting specific user and service needs, it's very important. If you just could click next a few times. Yeah. So when we started e-invoicing project in Zimbabwe, it was not about just deploying the solution. It was really about adopting the solution for the local context first. To do that, it was deploying a product to launch quickly in 9 months. This was something which the customer said is ultimately extremely important. And then during that and after that, we also looked into product flexibility to meet legislative constraints, to address internet connectivity challenges, because not everyone is online in the country, and online does not mean stable online. So there are different sorts of challenges there. To minimize taxpayer impact, meaning cost of compliance, which is frequently a heavy burden when the countries are introducing key invoicing type of solutions. And to manage that, what we've had is the co-creation process through joint development roadmap aligned by Zimbabwe Revenue Authority and NRD companies to see how to fit the best into that local context.
So we have planned already the technology, and also next step in our roadmap is not to forget to plan steps how we will ensure reliability and security. We've seen some projects which were launched before being sure that the system is stable, that the system is resilient, that the system is capable of maintaining a huge number of requests. And that is one of very important steps. So when we are planning our roadmap, we have to plan resources and time for these things, how we will test properly the system, the solution, before making it available to all the future users.
Yeah, just to illustrate both importance of the testing and how it can be handled in the projects. First, we chose one example, which, like available from the public sources. Kenya launched eTIM system for e-invoicing, I believe January 1st, 2024. And lack of performance testing meant huge challenges. And generally on January 3rd, the decision was to postpone the launch of the system, or it was like not postponing, but obligation to connect to the system was postponed for some time. I believe initially it was about a month, but as the time went, new onboarding deadlines were announced. The system got pretty stable by the end of Q1 2024, but not as stable. So what happened in July? Actually, the National Treasury told that they have surveyed all the MDAs in the country, and MDAs were not using the system because of their perceived lack of system performance and stability and unwillingness to connect to the system, which might impact their performance. So there was even lack of trust internally inside the government's agencies in the system delivered by another agency. How this could be done differently? We can look at the personal income tax filing, which happened in Lithuania, and I see that we have got some of these some strange issue with the slides, but I will tell. So when the personal income tax filing system launched in Lithuania back in 2004, the deadline was like May 2nd, and the system crashed because there were much more users using the system than it was expected, so the deadline was extended. But this happened only once, because after that, the Revenue Authority learned its lessons. They started doing much more careful testings. And when they launched the new system, in preparation for that, there was a question how the personal income tax wizard, which I mentioned before, will handle the workload. So the Revenue Authority did its own test. They just told to all the employees of the authority that tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 10:15 a.m., you must go to testing system and submit your own testing personal income tax declaration. Well, it's 2,000 people submitting declarations, and the system failed. But this was not in production. This was in a testing environment, which allowed for time to fix the issues, to do retestings, and so on. So the ultimate outcome was that when the process started on March 15th, 2020, 300,000 personal income tax declarations have been submitted just in 3 days. Submitted successfully, taxes paid when needed, tax refund applied for when needed, and so on. And everything went smoothly. So what were the learnings of the Revenue Authority? First of all, the bad user experience can ruin the trust. That's why it's very important to ensure that that experience is adequate. You might have an issue once, but not twice and not 3 times. Security and performance testing must be planned in advance. I should tell that there are cases, in many cases, when performance testing can be handled internally. Security, I would rely on professionals to do that, and organizations shall own the process. It's not the vendor who is responsible for that. It's the organization who has to tell, we must do performance testing, we must do security testing before we release the system for the public use.
Then step number 6. As we already discussed in step 2, when we re-engineer the process, part of that process will be changes in the legislation and regulation. So first of all, we cannot launch a new digital service until our institution is fit to serve in a new way. So in our roadmap, we should also foresee time and resources and actions, how we will adapt our institution, how we will review the roles and responsibilities, how we will review our internal procedures, the skills of our employees, and the resources which are needed. And also to have started in advance the legislation changes so that once the system is built, it can be launched into production because we have new legislation and regulations which already enable the new digital process.
Yeah, here we have an example or a couple of examples, and one of them comes from government service portal, which we have been building in Barbados. It was not only the portal, but also some of the model services for, to be accessed via the portal. So the new passport request was one of the 3 pilot digital services to be built. And initially it was planned that it will be delivered in 1 month, maybe 1.5 months time. What happened was, Ieva, if you could press next. Yeah. What happened is that the legal uncertainty in passport issue process or procedures led to 3 major reworks during the project and over 6 months delays. And it is always the challenge if you are delivering the project and the legal framework is not yet set, and it still might impact the shape of that service. And another example is the project implementation of e-invoicing in Lesotho, the project, by the way, financed by AfDB. So Revenue Service Lesotho, in their implementation, took a very measured and systematic approach towards the regulatory and institutional changes. Since this country did not have sufficient experience in the domain of e-invoicing, they relied on our team to support their effort. So we were able to support them in establishing the legal framework, the regulations, and so on, which are required for the system to be enabled. Another area was internal change management, like defining roles and responsibilities, new internal business processes, and so forth. External change management, stakeholder engagement, planning, public awareness raising planning, and so on. And I find it very important, a framework of key performance indicators, how the organization will measure the impact of the solution after the solution starts working, how to understand whether the solution performs as it should, and where are the bottlenecks which we need to resolve to be successful.
And the last point, but not least, is about promotion and tracking the service adoption among the end users. Because it's not enough to launch even the best digital service if the users, population or businesses for whom the service is built don't know about that, well, it's like not existing. So first of all, institutions should plan how we will encourage users to choose the new digital channels. And it's not so obvious that even a good service will be taken up quickly, because people sometimes are a bit cautious about the change. And from our practical work, helping institutions to prepare for that change, from different interviews and focus group with users in different parts of the world, there are some things which we identify as problematic. For example, if the services are connected to some financial data, to some financial transactions, to some personal sensitive data, they can be cautious. So explaining to them how these services are not only convenient, but also secure and can be trusted. Also sometimes to train the users and to provide them additional channels and support to access these digital services is very important. And to monitor feedback, because when the service is launched, it's really important to hear what users have to say about that, what early adopters have to say about that, what bigger group of users which discover the service have to say, and to improve the service.
Yeah, so talking about accessibility of the services, we worked with the Post Offices Kenya and Ministry of ICT to look how access to digital services via post offices could be improved. Because Kenya has well over 10,000 digital public services accessible online and accessible in 53 so-called Huduma centers in the metropolitan cities. But the question still persists: how to reach out to unbanked and digitally excluded population? So, Ieva, next, please. And yeah, let's move to the next slide. So generally what we looked into is the service delivery platform is there, provided by the Ministry of ICT, by ICT agency, which operates digital public infrastructure, unified service portal, and so on. There is a post office, which has presence, trust, digital infrastructure, skills, and so on. If you combine both of those, you can create also a new channel, next please, for digital service delivery in non-metropolitan, in rural areas where the post office is present, but no other public agency is present. So this is one of the ways how you can reach out to the public and how to ensure that the service which has been built for the people can be used by the people.
So I think this concludes our journey, how to plan a good digital transformation roadmap, how not to forget crucial steps. And this was a very short overview with practical examples. Of course, we know many more, but we hope that these insights were interesting and will be useful for you. Thank you for your attention on this particular topic.